You are up.
Bannock County Commissioners are back in session. We welcome all the people from the planning department. The first part of this is reports.
Yep, Tristan Borkman, Assistant Planning Director. So you have in your packet the year-in review for council from 2022 and then last year 2023, just in case you wanted to compare the last 2 years to each other. It looks like we had about 45 items that council heard over the course of the 12 months last year that they had meetings. And then we also just have provided you the permit applications starting from 2020 all the way to 2023. So you can see the variations in building permits, excavation permits, floodplain permits, and then the subdivisions. And if you have any questions for us about what we've done, what we have provided, we're happy to answer those. And then we can move on to anything that the council wants to provide information for.
Questions, comments?
Nope, looks like you've been busy.
So, what's been the challenges this last year?
There's been a lot of challenges.
I think it depends on how you define challenge.
That's true.
I don't have anything necessarily. I think the comprehensive plan has helped us quite a bit. We've sort of been elbowing up off the comprehensive plan so that we utilize that, because that was where the county got together and decided what it wanted to do with some of its more close to town outlying areas. And so we've had a lot of questions about what can be done and what can't be done in those areas. Those are some things that I think have been helpful. So I'm glad that the comprehensive plan is available. Otherwise, we'd sort of been trying to figure out how to do the right thing without guidance, without official
Can I have you
guidance.
go ahead and introduce yourselves too?
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's
My
on the
name's Chuck
record.
Heisler. I don't know where. I represent North Bannock County, outside of the city. Is that kind of my bailiwick?
Yeah.
So I represent North Bannock County outside of the city because I live up Buckskin, about 500 feet outside the city limits. It's a little more than that, but not much more.
I'm Barbara Hill, and I'm from Downey. I don't live, well, I live in the city limits, but I'm representing the south end of the county.
Stuart Ward. I live North County, out in the Tyke area. So, I don't know if that's, I don't know what area. I
Yeah,
represent.
you're just inside Chubbuck ACI area of city impact.
So,
Ed's not here. He lives down in Income. Yeah, not here yet. I don't know if he's coming or not.
Yeah, he's supposed to.
city's coming. I would say, commissioners, I've only been on the council for a year. I think this meeting last year was my very first meeting. I was sworn in, I think, this meeting. From my standpoint, I think the biggest challenge for me at least is not, I wouldn't say not enough, but we could use more work sessions with you guys to know what you guys want, or maybe not want, but how you want it to, if there's anything that you're directing us to do or anything like that, more work sessions, just so we're on the same page.
How we know how to help you.
When it comes to stuff like that.
Okay. And that's kind of a challenge in two ways. I mean, because you sit as an independent board and then we're the appeal process. And so we can't direct your meetings,
Right.
but ideas and thoughts, kind of a pattern. And I think going through the zoning ordinances and stuff as they've been doing, and going over the comprehensive plan and stuff helps both sides to come to a better conclusion of the direction that we feel like the county needs to go.
So that said, Hal Jensen, Planning Director, one item that I don't want to put words in Stuart's mouth, but I think what he's looking for is, what is the commission's vision for economic development? And as we have these particular items that come to the council that have potentially real good economic impact, what makes sense against an old ordinance? How do we work with some of that as we're trying to update comprehensive plan and ordinance, et cetera, and so that they recognize what it is that the commission, who ultimately as the legislative body can control some of those decisions relative to economic development. Case in point is one that reared its head through this solar ordinance calisthenic that we've been going through together. So I mean, that's a really good one to understand. That's my thought about where Stuart was heading.
Yeah, just so that we understand where your vision for the county, so we're not approving things or doing things that are completely left field of of what your vision, your guys' vision of the county is, kind of a thing.
Well, and I can just tell you, out of the commissioners, I've been here the longest, and I just started my 6th year. And so we've had a lot of changes. There was 10 commissioners in 5 years there. So I don't think there was a true vision. I come in just at the end, or when they was doing the first comp plan, and I wasn't impressed with some of the things that went on in it. But I will say that when I first come in here, the phone calls that I was getting was complaints about this office, and that has changed 100%. I don't get them phone calls. I mean, of course, you always get somebody. Everybody wants things their own way, but that's why you have the rules and stuff. But now, between the office and what the board's doing, it is very much appreciated, the direction. It's a volunteer position. And anytime you do government work that is volunteer, you have a lot of bosses, and they all want it their way. So thank you very much for your dedication and your willingness to serve. But we could have, we could meet a few times a year or something and just kind of see where we're at with the comp plan, see where we're at with the ordinances that are going through and communications. The other thing that in the last year, what we've done is on all boards that we have in the county, we actually interview all applicants. And so the county, the commissioners give their input on a direction at that time too, of where we'd like things to go and the direction and stuff. So as there's positions that are going to come open on this board and stuff, we've already been getting quite a few applications, and we'll open that up and have some interviews, and that'll be an opportunity also for communication as people are put back on the board or added to the board or changes and stuff.
I got a couple things I would tell you from my perspective. I'm a firm believer in you either get busy selling or you get busy dying. And for a long time, I don't think Bannock County can decide if it wants to live or die. And we've just been floundering. So anything that you can do to promote the growth in Bannock County, and as I'm just thinking about it, do we have commercial zones out in the county? Are there things like that we could do that would foster or invite some commercial development out inside the county? The other part of that, and I've talked with Director Jensen about this a few times, is we have an affordable housing crisis in the United States as a whole and in our community specifically. So are there things that we can look at from the county perspective to facilitate maybe some denser housing areas or something? But along with that, then you got to start worrying about water issues, which I know is not necessarily our purview, but how can we foster that growth with maybe changing some of our density? I've talked with Hal a couple times, not real fond of the open space. We've got to do some things different with that, which will allow some of these things. So whatever we can do to continue to be efficient. I think you guys as a whole have done a great job moving forward that way. But we've got to get busy and become more inviting for growth, but we have to manage the growth. We can't control the growth, but if we can manage it appropriately, whatever that looks like, that's what we've got to do.
Chuck Heisler, I want to push back on the sense. You guys are our representatives to state government to a certain extent, to up through the state government to the federal government. And to be frank, I think always pushing things off on the Idaho Department of Water Resources, although I recognize there's legislative reasons for that. The biggest complaints we wind up with are, well, how come the county doesn't do anything about water? Well, it's not in our purview per se by ordinance to do anything about water. But there needs to be some urgency communicated up the line. And I recognize you guys can only do so much. But I want to communicate our sense of urgency to you from the people of Bannock County who feel a sense of urgency about this problem, realistic or not. Every single meeting where we have a new subdivision which will allow wells, every single person who is opposed to that new subdivision mentions water as an issue, regardless of any of the other issues. Sometimes it's sanitation, obviously, too much crowding, blocking my view, whatever. There's some of those things, but every single person who's opposed to all of these subdivisions, I think, bring up water. I mean, they just do. Water's their main. Well, my well will run dry. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, if we add 20 more people, my well's going to run dry, which may not be a realistic concern, but it's still a concern, obviously. And I think in regard to open space, one of the things, I think it depends on the areas you're looking at, right? Where we have a large urbanized area here, or in those urbanized areas, there's always one of the beauties of Bannock County is the urban-rural kind of interface that we have. Everybody here is 20 minutes from the great wild outdoors at most, pretty much, no matter where you live. You can get to a hiking trail and not see another person, and that's great about Bannock County. So I agree that maybe as we close in on these urban areas, the open space rules should maybe be modified. But I have concerns out in the country, and particularly in recreational areas, where that's more of an issue. One of the things I struggle with the ordinances is they're not as nuanced as I would like based on location. I would love to be able to see us figure out a way to get commercial development into areas where there's only residential, small commercial development. I'm not talking about industrial or anything kind of like that, but stores and shops and what have you in these areas that are all residentially zoned now, and I don't know how to do that. Presumably there is a way to do that, but in my experience, if it's not immediately connected to commercial, you can't add commercial. So I'd like to see some more flexibility in regard to the urban areas of Bannock County, out just on the edges of the urban areas. But I don't have any problems with the open space requirements because as we are beginning to find, wildlife migrates, and we still need to make some of those pathways for that wildlife migration.
And I agree with you on that. If we're within those areas of city impact that we can foresee growing that way, let's look at reducing some of those open space.
Yeah,
Out in the middle of McCammon, Eremo, no, open space needs to stay where it's at. Downey, yeah, open space needs to stay where it's at. But there's some spaces, I think, where we could help mitigate some of the housing shortages by reducing some of our open space to make it more affordable.
And I don't know how to do that. I mean, I don't know how I mean, we're hemmed in by the ordinance where it's clear. We're hemmed in by the ordinance. And the ordinance, I don't want to say the ordinances aren't always clear, but there are some, and I know that staff's done a magnificent job of identifying and hammering loose nails down into the floor of county ordinance. But there's still some places where I think they're just big holes.
Yes.
And we would love to, well, not me because I'm about out of here, but I'm sure Stuart would love to help draft ordinances that assist us in doing what you're suggesting. But I don't think there's a way to do it, at least in my experience. And you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any way to modify these sort of situations without literally changing ordinance.
Yeah. That's correct.
which is
So-
what we're doing.
And
We're working on that.
And that's a trial based on my brief experiences.
And I share your frustration with the water and the
Yeah.
DEQ, because if we could do some things with community wells, community septics to help prime, especially in these areas that are close to the areas of city impact, to help prepare them to join city services when that becomes available, I think that's an absolute responsibility that we have.
The problem seems to come in, at least in my experience with, and this is not I don't want to imply that this is the fault of developers. It's not their fault. It's just infinitely more expensive for them to set up these community services. And that's the opposite of what it is you're trying to do, which is to make things less expensive for people
Right.
to buy lots and you know, that kind of thing. So there's kind of a, if you expect, we would anticipate that those community wells would be developed by the developer, right? And that they would, but then they have to pass that cost on in order to make a profit. They have
Right.
to pass that cost on to the people who buy the lots or the future homeowners, and then that drives the prices of development up and that.
But right now, the state has a moratorium on community wells. And so that's the problem, is the state has their moratorium, so then the developer says, well, if I'm gonna go move forward, I've gotta do the individual wells.
Right.
I mean, just look right there at the city of Income,
Oh, yeah.
when they decided not to annex the property, and didn't make sense at all.
Right.
Still doesn't. You're right there, hook up into the community well.
The city of Income chose to make that decision. We had a lot of discussions with the mayor of Income, came to our meeting and talked to us about it, and we listened to him and the developer, and to me, to this day, it's still a poor decision on the city of Income's part. And I felt like, in that case, I felt like the developer had tried to work with the city of Income in that regard, and in order to not pass on any costs to the existing people who lived in Income, they passed on the benefits.
I live there.
So, okay, well, then you know better than I do.
I was involved in a lot of them discussions myself.
Yeah, so you know better than I am. And that's,
But that's where I mean, every time we go to a meeting in Boise, we talk about water, the state legislature's trying to do things, everybody is very, very concerned about it, but that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody's
when does
concerned,
that-
but no action's happened.
Sorry, when does that moratorium expire for community wells?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Because
But every time I've been to
There's
Boise,
legislation going through right now for requiring community wells on subdivisions that are like 5 or 6 lots or more, regardless. And I can't remember where that's at in the process, but that's why I was curious, if it was gonna be expiring like in July, where that one would just take over, or?
I don't know. It must not be a 180-day moratorium because it's been in there for a lot of years.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
It's been there a few years.
I didn't know that, okay.
Yeah.
so I think it sounds like we share some of the same frustrations across the board, and I don't know, I don't have a good answer for a lot of that. I have had some ideas, but it's just gonna take getting people to come together and discuss it and draft the ordinances, and then listen to everyone tell us why it's gonna be a terrible thing, and then push it through anyway. Because that's kind of, you know, I have to be honest, I've only been doing this off and on, because I show up off and on these days for about 4 years, and I work for the state of Idaho Transportation Department. And I've been in direct access to the public for 25 years of my career at ITD. And I've heard more unrealistic complaints in the last 4 years as a member of the Planning and Zoning Council than in 25 years at ITD. And I dealt in permitting at ITD as well. And so it's just wearing, and I understand you guys must be worn out from the constant bombardment. But I don't know how to make that better without pushing through some changes in the ordinances to get to where you want to go.
And I believe that that's the nature of the public at this time. We got into a lot of that during COVID, and I'm not trying to push
Right,
blame
yeah.
there, but things fell apart. And now, instead of actions, we have complaints.
Well, I'm hoping that you guys will find some good candidates. I'm glad you didn't have to interview me when I came in. I might not have got this gig, so. Probably, whew, dodged that bullet anyway. So I'm glad you guys are doing that, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how it goes for everybody. I really feel like the way that the planning and zoning group has sort of turned around since I started even, has clarified things for me, and I really am more optimistic in regard to getting things, moving the county forward in a more modernizing direction as far as ordinance goes and things like that. So I can't compliment you guys highly enough, and I don't have anything to gain by it because I'm about out of here. But they've done a great job of helping us and teaching us and guiding us, and I think that I agree with you. I had heard, and my interactions with previous planning and zoning officials had not been nearly as successful as my engagement and interactions with you guys. So I've appreciated that, and I've had a few over the dim and distant past. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the county improves. I don't know, Stuart, you got to have, you're the chairman, and you've got, I know, legitimate interests involved in all of this stuff. You have more experience with it than I do, and as a customer.
Well, we've always had our struggles with the ordinance because it's so vague. But I'm optimistic that the new ordinance is going to clear a lot of that up when we get to that point. Hopefully sooner than later. But just from my clients' standpoint, some of the county ordinances are just frustrating, as you guys know as well. And so just trying to help them understand how to navigate that and get the product that they want within the current ordinance is a struggle sometimes. And so, but, like I said, I'm optimistic that we can make positive changes in the near future and proceed. How fast that moves, we'll see, but, and that's where I think it's important for us as a council and as citizens of the county, residents of the county, to understand what the vision of the county is. And Commissioner Huff, you're promoting development in the county and promoting commercial and affordable housing in the county, I think is a big thing, because I hear from a lot of people that Bannock County doesn't want growth, and which is not what I see from being on this council.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the mentality that they have because the county's been like that for a while. That, no, we don't want growth out there, so we're going to do whatever we can to stop it. And so knowing that that's something that you guys are looking at or wanting us to do is, I think, a huge step for us to understand. So.
And it goes back to what you said, every ordinance, depends if you're for what's going on or against it. I mean, we got,
Right.
and it's not always equal sides, but to evaluate it and what is the very best for the county overall, that is very challenging, and that's why your position and our position, and that's where I know that Hal has come in, and he's ingrained in his people that we want to develop. We want to help people. And customer service, Jeff's always talking about customer service. And that is our main goal, is customer service, and how do we help people, and property rights and all of it that goes together. But there's always two sides.
It always surprises people that government's about customer service, in my experience. But it is. I mean, in the end, that's really what, at least in this country, that's what it is. It's customer service. Some of you were elected to be, to serve your electorate, your customer base, and some of us are volunteered, or some of us volunteered to be customer servants in a way, and And I appreciate that. I'm gonna come back to this because it's something that has been nagging at me for a long time. Bannock County is really two ideas. And for a long time, we've only had one, in my opinion. I think the difference in Bannock County has always been that the people of the county viewed Pocatello and Chubbuck as kind of as rural towns. And Pocatello Chubbuck is no longer a rural area. I mean, up until very recently, you could farm and right next door to town, and it made perfect sense because there was no one within 5 miles of you. But as we grow, that ruralness in this urban part, the north part of the county, I think those days are past. And I value agriculture as much as the next Idahoan. I genuinely do. I don't know much about it from a personal experience standpoint, but I know people, and I've worked with a lot of people who are heavily involved in agriculture. But I think we have to recognize that this part of the county is no longer rural. And if we want to develop and we want to grow, this part of the county can no longer be rural in both either mindset or development or anything else. We really have to accept that that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with. That doesn't mean we don't want to keep some of the rural aspects, trees and parks and the places for people to be able to get out of town, trails, that kind of stuff, so that they can experience that. But Bannock County is two counties. It's, whatever you want to call it, north of Ingham, essentially, and south of Ingham, really, which is the rest, which is a huge amount of the county, and they're radically different things.
Oh, we hear it every meeting we have.
Right, and so the rules have to apply equally to everyone in the county, and I recognize that, but we want to get some flexibility, I think, in being able, because it'd be great if you can have a job in Pocatello and drive from McCammon, or drive from Ingham, or if you get on the interstate and drive from Downey if you want to, But if there's no jobs, because there's no development, then there's no way to do that. If you want to live the rural lifestyle in Idaho, or in particularly Bannock County, I live the rural lifestyle. I'm 5 minutes from Ridley's at my house, and I'm on 2 acres and surrounded by junipers. I can't see any of my neighbors' houses. So I live a relative, it's not a farming lifestyle, but it's a out in the wilderness kind of lifestyle. I get deer in my front yard, flock of turkeys wanders through, coyotes occasionally, that kind of thing. So it's not like I don't live that, but I'm 10 minutes from my office down here south of town, 5 minutes from the Ridleys, 20 minutes from the movie theater. I can go any place, and if I want to go hiking, I'm 5 minutes from a trail where I don't have to see another human being if the weather's bad. So, and that's what's great about Bannock County, and that's what's great about, Pocatello in general, but at the same time, if we're going to add more people to experience that, we're going to have to figure out how to develop this part of the county differently than south of here.
And I agree with parts of that, because the growth around Ingham, Lava has become a recreation town.
Yep.
It's a totally different from every place
Yep.
else in the county. The growth outside of Downey, the growth outside of Lava, or McCammon, there's some similarities,
Right.
and that's what I say. We have to, the area outside of Ingham right there should have been changed, and because it's a suburb of Pocatello anymore. So I agree with parts of what you
Right.
say, but we hear constantly, Bannock County stops at the gap. Nobody cares about that end. Well, that's not the truth.
Right, and I agree with you.
We honestly care. We care about Downey, we care about Ingham, we care about every one of those communities. That's why you come and volunteer, and we want to do what's right for the whole, but you can't have the same rules in
Right.
every location.
Right, and that's all I'm getting at. But we apply the same rules repeatedly,
Well,
as though the people in Chubbuck were the same as the people in Downey or the people in Aramo, for
that's
maybe a better
because
example.
25 years ago, every one of the cities around here says, my area of impact is 10 miles out. which they cannot ever affect. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't have that.
Yeah.
And we still haven't got away from that mentality.
Exactly. I agree. So I want you to, I guess, help Stuart and Barb, help you with that vision as we get to that stage. I'm really copping out. Next month's my last month. So that's why I sound like I've got, and I can retire in November too, so. So I got a lot of potential endings in my future.
Barb?
Well, I was going to just bring up, and I don't know if you've done anything more on the solar panel ordinance, but I think from a council perspective, when you kicked it back to us with some guidance to revise it, I think that was a little, I want to use the word disheartening on my side, because we gave you our best vision from what we had. And it got kicked back, and I think that's kind of where some of this is coming from. I also think, and like I said, I don't know where you're at right now, but I think the decision to say no to big solar panel farms is going to ultimately hurt the county, because they will end up suing you and you will lose. And so if that's the vision that you want, then you should regulate it to the extent that it becomes difficult and costly for them to put them in. And then you're not saying no, you're saying yes, but you've got to fit in this narrow window. And I've seen growth in other states, kind of in where Bannock County is right now. And I think you're hurting the county by doing it that way. I understand they're very vocal. I've been to a lot of those meetings, whether solar panels was on the agenda or not. But you're hearing from the minority, the vocal minority, and not from the people who own property down there. I mean, they're talking about these people that are going to make buku bucks, but most of them don't have a piece of property. Most of them are living in the city and would drive by it on the expressway or the freeway. But I think that's where, as the ultimate legislative body, that's where you can be effective, because you need to be the medium. And if you want to narrow it, great, give us some guidance in that effect. But the yes and no coming from this body, I think, is a big problem, because you're going to cost the taxpayers money ultimately.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Barb. I specifically avoided that meeting because I didn't want to go over it again, because I thought we'd done our best job the first time, and I didn't have anything to add. And to hear the same people complain about the same thing over again was, I wasn't up for it that day. And I know you guys have to put up with it, but you got elected.
And they make a lot of
And you
money.
ran.
They make a lot of money.
Well, yeah, they make a lot more money than we do, but they didn't turn out more money.
We realize that.
Yeah, so it's not, so when I asked the question, for which I never got an answer, which was probably appropriate, but I still resent it. Why are we hearing this again? And because I felt like we had addressed it. And, and if the answer is.
And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because you guys had heard it. And what come before us, and then we didn't have a meeting we had an open meeting down at Marsh Valley. We heard a lot of discussions. And from that meeting and what come through and some of the questions that we still have, we didn't have the answers that we wanted. So by statute, we had to send it back to you.
To get more answers.
To change or to open up. Because we had one deal that you guys presented. That was number one. When it come to us at Marsh Valley, there was 1, 2, and 3. And so there was things that you guys had not heard. So we can, as a legislative board, just go and change things after you guys had had an open meeting, a public meeting. So we had to send it back to you. Then it will come back to us in a public meeting, and that's where we will make the legislative decision of what direction we want to go. So it was to fulfill state statute that it had to come back to you the second time.
What did they hear that we didn't hear?
So we had put on the website a couple of alternative proposals to get people's thoughts and ideas to help make it easier for them to hopefully vocalize what they wanted to see when it came to the ordinance and how they wanted to see it regulated.
After we had our meeting?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it had to come back to you a
Why
second
would you
time.
do that? I mean, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, Tristan. I'm gonna blame, so you guys asked them to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we had a discussion meeting here and decided to have the meeting at Marsh Valley. And at the meeting at Marsh Valley, there was basically 3 different proposals.
So I'm gonna encourage you guys not to ever do that again, to ask all your questions up front, maybe, I guess, and that, because it's a complicated process, and I don't care about solar farms one way or the other. I mean, I'm a proponent of alternate forms of energy, because at some point, and maybe after my great-great-great-grandkids are dead, we're gonna need alternate forms of energy. I don't care if we pass them or we don't pass them. I'm not engaged in that ordinance. What I was engaged in is the discussion, and I felt like that the solar folks had an answer for most of the concerns that were both realistic and feasible. I work as an environmental planner now, but that mostly consists of generating these documents. But I have to look at construction projects and make sure that the construction project is also feasible, right? We don't stop a project because the rules are, we find a way to mitigate whatever our concerns are. And I felt like we had gone through the ordinance pretty clearly and mitigated or answered the questions where there were legitimate concerns from the public. I mean, I'm not worried the solar farm's gonna cook birds out of the air or anything else, but I am concerned about fires, obviously. I'm concerned about animal passage. I'm concerned about a lot of other issues that people brought up down there, and I think we found responses to most of that stuff. So I don't understand, I guess, why we asked more questions. Is that, I mean, what questions did we not answer when it came to you?
Well, and we were receiving, I don't know, we've received 300, 400 emails.
Oh, I'm sure that's true, and I'm sure they all had the same.
And so as we talked to different people and different things that have gone on,
Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable that we had the answers that we needed.
Okay, well, and I understand that. And it's important for you guys to understand what it is you're dealing with and to recognize what the concerns are. I get, you have a much more difficult job than I do, far and away. I mean, genuinely, Planning and Zoning Council is pretty straightforward compared to all the stuff you guys have to deal with. So I understand that, but I guess I don't know what further. I thought we pretty exhaustively discussed that, or got a pretty exhaustive list of potential concerns.
But that's what it come down to, is there was 2 other proposals that had come out. And so we had 3 proposals that we was looking at. You guys had only seen 1. And so that's when you had to have another meeting, so that when we come and have our meeting, we can look at the 2 proposals basically and make a decision.
Did you guys select a different one? I wasn't at the meeting.
I didn't go there.
Oh,
Yes.
did you guys select a different one?
You made some
Okay.
substantial changes.
So you selected the preferred version? The council,
We
the.
Modified version 1.
Yeah.
basically, yeah, that's what we, the modified one.
I don't know.
It was, I can't remember.
And let me clarify that. They made recommendations that will come
Yeah.
before us.
Right.
So nobody's modified anything yet because we're
But
the only ones that can
But that was
modify.
generated by you guys as commissioners.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's your guidance.
So we'll take full responsibility.
That's all, no, it's all right. Like I said, I'm not married to either answer in that. But I think Barb has a valid point, I mean, I think if you guys want to see maybe we should just vet our ordinances a little closer before we start pushing them out to either group, so that we know and maybe we've answered, and I don't want to put the onus on the Planning and Zoning group, but I will, because they're the ones who are doing the work, to maybe vet these things a little bit closer between the 2 groups. we've sort of discussed the solar ordinance a little bit ahead of time, but what I know about large-scale solar power plants was relatively limited. I did a little research before we had our meeting, and then I did what I considered pretty thorough questioning of, Q&A of the staff that they sent, the professionals they sent from parts east of here, if you consider Colorado east. And so I thought we discussed that pretty well, but maybe it's just that we need to know what we're doing a little bit better beforehand.
And that's all of us.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where
No, I
accept,
agree.
that's where we accept the responsibility. This was something new to us,
Oh, yeah.
in essence.
New to me.
And so we're gonna get better, but this is one that has drawn a lot of attention.
Well, and it's something like this, like Howard said earlier, that this specific example of the solar ordinance, it would have been maybe beneficial to have a work session to know where you guys were, even before any public meetings or anything like that, just where we're at right now. And if, on the other side, is if it gets kicked back to us like it did, to have a little bit more background of why it got kicked back and what are we making at that point, are we making a final decision, or are we just recommending back to you? Because after that meeting, we were.
Because you don't ever get to make a final decision. You make a recommendation.
Right after.
They make final decisions on
certain things.
other stuff.
Yeah,
But-
but on making an ordinance is what I'm
Correct.
talking
Yeah,
about
right.
right
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm making an ordinance. You
And we don't want the final
And that's
decision.
at that meeting, that's what we assumed we were doing, is making a recommendation to you. And then we were told by the bombardment of the public that came up to us after that we ruined it because of our decision that we made that night, because you aren't going to hear it again. And there was, so just so that we are 100%, like, we know exactly what we're doing. And I guess, not expecting you guys to do like a staff report kind of a thing, but just a little bit of a memo that says, this got kicked back to you, here's why, and this is your duties at this time, kind of a thing, would be beneficial for us if we're not going to do it.
Yeah, I might have showed
Well,
up for that.
And typically, that would have occurred at the February meeting. Because when we have our items of interest and we go over any recommendations from the commissioners, anything that you guys have sent to the commissioners and what they've ultimately done, we would go over that stuff, but we didn't have a quorum for the February meeting. And the very next meeting was the ordinance meeting.
Gotcha.
So that's
Okay.
why this was kind of a weird special case scenario where communication wasn't as great because of that February meeting being canceled. But
And I understand it's all new to everybody. That whole process was, and so my personal thought was that I was confused on, like Chuck said, why we're hearing it again, but also what exactly are we doing? Because we saw the entire ordinance changes, not just solar, right? And so I was confused on if you guys were kicking back everything because you didn't like it, or just portions of it, and that was just some miscommunication. And so, and that's all I was asking for at the beginning, was just making sure that we're communicating openly so that we know what is expected on both sides, or anticipated, I guess. So.
And we're gonna improve. We're learning every time we have a meeting. We've had more meetings here lately than in the first 5 years I was here. So, but it comes down again.
We're not being critical.
No,
I
we
appreciate
appreciate.
everything you guys do.
Absolutely.
And
They have a much harder job.
And as volunteers, we put ourselves in this position, which to a certain degree you guys did too.
You definitely did.
Well, we're elected, so we
People
can
elect
be
people
voted
to
out.
that, But, and so it's hard on both sides to deal with the public and understand and try to navigate where they're coming from on both sides and try to do the best for the county.
Well, and that's where everybody wants to talk about personal property rights. But I heard something the other day, and actually, we don't have personal property rights. My property's paid off, but if I don't pay my taxes, they're gonna have a meeting right here, and they're gonna take my property. And when I die, whoever, my kids get it, whatever, or they're gonna have to pay taxes, and whoever buys that property is gonna pay taxes. And it doesn't matter if the bank doesn't own anything on it, or, you know, you don't know then, but in reality, you never do finish and own the property.
That's true.
Yeah, but the taxes go to make sure that you can get to it.
There you go.
So
There's a positive.
there's always
out.
a plus. Where's Kyle when we need him?
We're gonna have to go into this next session because Jeff's gotta leave.
Yep.
Yep, real quick, just to wrap up the council meeting, we did receive a letter from Tam Maynard, one of our other council members, and he is resigning from his position. He's got some personal family health stuff that he is dealing with, and he doesn't feel like he can commit to the council any longer, so.
And where did he live?
He lived in McCammon, I want to
He's
say.
South County.
South County.
Yeah.
I think he's right by
Downey.
Hawkins Basin.
Okay, okay.
Outside of Downey's impact area.
Okay.
Can I ask one question before you go off? Stuart, what's the frequency of meetings you'd like to meet with these guys? You thinking like biannually, quarterly? Just so you guys can,
I think we have at least 2 a year, like this one, and then maybe one in the fall or something. I think that would be plenty. Unless something major comes up, then maybe another one intermediate. I don't think we need quarterly or anything
okay,
like that.
all right.
And honestly, with us interviewing people, and so they get to know us and we get to know them a little bit, being placed on the board, that will open up, I mean, some avenues of communication, I hope, that way. But it looks like we need to interview before the first of.
Yes, and I was just going to go down that path, a couple of quick
Okay.
housekeeping items. Chuck, his last meeting is April, so we'll need his replacement in place by the May meeting, as well as now Mr. Baird,
Okay.
a resignation, so we'll have two. FYI, Tristan and I in the past have interviewed. I was not aware that the commission requests that all boards interview, so.
We just started doing that this year.
Okay, so we will get that coordinated and we'll get the short list put together for you.
Okay.
It's not a short list.
Pardon?
It's not a short list.
It is for
FYI,
Hal.
We have applicants, Commissioner, we have applicants, and even though we have applicants, they don't qualify based upon the state statute
Understand
for
that.
the makeup of the board.
If that's what you mean by short list, then
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. Meaning those that are qualified based upon the
Geographic.
composition geographically.
Understand.
Okay?
We do have 3 more applications that have not been forwarded to you guys yet. We got them at comp plan open houses, so we do have 3 more for you to review
Okay.
as well.
So, yeah, just, we'll get them with Christie and you can participate in them interviews if you want. We can arrange that, but
Okay.
we'll get that set up.
Before we go, as a courtesy, as just a common courtesy, our staff, my team needs to express their thanks to the council and for the amount of time that they put in. They have packets that they read through, and they have them a week ahead of time. They do a lot of work outside of just showing up and deliberating, and we thank them. They bring a wealth of knowledge and counsel and wisdom. They do a great job. And then in a public forum, thank my team. They're phenomenal.
We agree 100%. Thank you. Thank you to your team. Thank you to the council.
That said, Marge was out of the office yesterday not feeling good, and we found out how critical it is to have Marge in the office yesterday. It was not a comedy of errors, but there were a few things that we were somewhat lost without having
Keeps
Marge.
the
in the
cogs
office.
turning for sure, right?
She is the quiet hub that makes it all happen, so we greatly appreciate it.
I love every time I walk in there and see her smiling face.
True story there.
I know I'm in the right spot. Thank you. All right, let's go to this next phase.
No, he's on his way though. If we can get started if we need to.
We have an item in front of you, planned unit development. There's a couple of things in the equation. This property will start with us if we can come to an agreement at this meeting relative to the requirements of the planned unit development. We will start and finish this through, but by the time we're finished through, this should be annexed into the city of Pocatello and out of our jurisdiction by the time this goes.
Do we have a date for that annexation? Do you know?
They're looking for August 1st.
August? We were thinking it was October, so, okay.
That's the early side, and that's what they're really working towards.
So, right off the start, explain what a planned unit, what we're doing specifically.
Tristan, I'm going to default to you.
So a planned unit development is an additional way for developers to have increased density when they're connecting to services. It includes unified control, so it would typically be all of the structures are built the same way, potentially by one or a couple of builders who are all outlined the same sort of floor plan. And it requires some additional criteria, including this joint meeting with council and commission, where you have a pretty wide range of capabilities of how you want to regulate it. So it's not quite, it doesn't have to adhere to all of the ordinance requirements with regards to lot size, density, those types of things. And those are some things that you guys as a group can then decide this is what we want to see when you take it through the subdivision process.
And so, this is just a meeting to decide whether we want to follow the ordinance or not.
Yeah, so it's basically a pre-development meeting where normally a regular subdivision, we would do the pre-development meeting with staff and the developer and outline, here's what the ordinance says, here's what you can do. And for this one, it's joint with commission and council instead of just staff, where the two boards can get together and decide this is what we want the development to look like.
It gives greater flexibility for the design standards as well as changing the density. Because they're connecting to city water and city sewer and they have signed an annexation agreement, we don't have any requirements for size of acreage due to area for septic tank and drain field, etc. So some of those requirements go away. It also is on the edge of the city of Pocatello. It behaves more urban than it does suburban and rural, and so therefore it doesn't necessarily fit the absolutism of the ordinance, but a condition or a planned unit development allows you to, without actually doing a formal resolution or doing something that is in direct conflict of development standards of the ordinance, it gives you that flexibility to do so as long as it's classified as a planned unit development.
And
Okay.
what's the location of it?
This is the old skate park,
Oh,
basically,
Right there off
Area.
of South Fifth.
right off South Fifth,
It's right next to the skate park.
right next to the skate park, just to
the
the
skate
outside.
park will still be there?
Yeah.
Actually,
No, that
no, the
one's
skate park's a
being-
different project.
Yeah, it is
This
actually.
is.
Just all those houses, those little fourplexes,
There is a
is that that one?
care facility,
Yeah,
a residence
that's the
that's a care
same
facility, and just to
developer
the
that's
north
doing
of that,
Where-
we have
what
just
is
finished
this
a
development?
side-by-side
This one
duplex
is going
commercial
to be
rental.
right behind
They're
that
going directly
group
up the hill
home,
behind that.
the
Behind that unit? Okay.
Belmont group home.
Yeah, I
is what
don't
it's
know.
called.
So this
Yeah.
is pushing beyond all those fourplexes or whatever.
And this development basically is a proposal to build side-by-side duplex, rental duplex, that look just like the one that was just completed on South Fifth.
And then looking at this, Lot 6 doesn't have a building in it?
No.
Lot 6 is being proposed as a buildable lot. I'll let Stuart touch on, he's the He's the surveyor for this project.
Can you see that? Sorry. I ran out of the office and I left them on my desk.
There's handwriting all over it.
So just to read really quick what this initial review looks like in the ordinance, it says, "A sketch plan of the planned unit development proposal shall be reviewed at a joint meeting of the Planning and Development Council and the Board of County Commissioners before the proposal can be submitted to the council for public hearing. The purpose of the meeting shall be to make the prospective developer of a project aware of concerns which might affect the proposed development." And then overall, planned unit developments, like Hal said, are intended to allow greater flexibility in the formulation of development plans, which will fit better with the environment in which the development is to be placed.
Okay. So, then looking at this, there's four questions I have. One is you're hooking up to city sewer, city water.
Correct.
You're already signed a paper then for annexation.
Correct.
And, what was the other one? I'll think about it for a minute, oh, the other one is, you're following all city building restrictions then. If we're changing county, you're gonna meet the city's requirements.
Yes
On
and
the-
no.
On the building itself or?
Well, on what we're agreeing to here,
So
I
on
guess.
the improvement on the roadway, the plan is to build a City of Pocatello standard road. So 50-foot right-of-way instead of the county's 60-foot, but curb, gutter, pavement, like a City of Pocatello road is the plan. And right now, there's a 60-foot access easement on the front piece to access the back. But as part of the plat, we're gonna reduce that, our plan is to reduce that down to 50-foot right away. And then we're gonna stub it all the way to the east end of the property with a temporary cul-de-sac turnaround. And that's why lot 6 doesn't have a building on it.
Okay.
Because the turnaround will encumber most of lot 6. But in talks with county staff, I forgot the road. Darby, that goes by the jail and then loops back around to the south. At some point, may connect to this property, and then that would create a loop road and the cul-de-sac would go away, and then lot 6 would be buildable at that point.
We just soon closed Darby.
But that's the extension where we come through the subdivision, go up. There's a subdivision proposed to the south of the jail. As it comes up, then there's potential for taking an extension and go
That way.
south. Those conversations have been held with the City of Pocatello Planning Department as their long-range planner, et cetera, as they get ready to annex, looking at how all of these will tie together, sewer, water, loops, et cetera. So the other item to be aware of, the developer, property owner came to us and said what would be the time frame, and our first conversation was you should go with the city. And he came back and he says, I have the potential now, what can you do for me? So we studied the ordinance and came up with this as an approach because it's going to save him approximately 9 to 10 months before he would ever start the process with the City of Pocatello. So it gains him about a year and a half for development.
Based on what you just said, it sounds like they are going to meet all of the city's standards. Am I mistaken on that?
That is the plan because we're because we're connecting to their utilities and because we know the annexation is coming.
They're going to meet all the city standards,
We're gonna meet their standards on the roadway.
but they are not going to meet some of the county standards, such as the 60-foot.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So it's only county standards they would not meet. Is there anything besides the 60 to 50 width?
No.
Lot size. right?
Well, lot size, but that,
And density, right? Because county doesn't have that density, right?
Correct.
and that's why we're going through the PUD, because then we can get, this density in these lot sizes. Currently in the county, correct me if I'm wrong, if we were to do 100% county,
You couldn't do that.
we have to do 1 acre lots in this area.
Correct.
which would only allow him about 2 more lots back there, because it's only about 3.5 acres behind him. So three lots, sorry. But in this case, he can build these duplex, they're not residential, they're commercial shop office type buildings. So there's an office up front with storage space behind. And then he can build them and keep them, rent them out, or turn around and sell them.
So is what you're proposing with this planned unit development, is this this is an exception to what the county would require in these 3 areas? The width of the road, the lot size, and what was the third thing you said?
Density.
The density.
Density. So
Yeah.
these would be 3 exceptions to what we have in place at the county? Or is it not an exception because by PUD it is allowed?
Correct. Yeah,
Yes.
so a PUD allows up to 7 times greater density than what's required by that zone in the ordinance. So they can have up to a 7 times greater density than 1 acre lots.
So we have in our rules, the PUD, which can
Yes.
be used in this case, and that would take care of density. Would that
Mhm.
take care of lot size?
Yeah.
Yes.
What about the width of the roads?
So the road
Or is
standards.
that an exception?
The
Or-
road standards state when they're connecting to city services, they can build the roads to city standards. So it is allowed
It
in
is allowed
our,
in the PUD.
in our planned unit development.
And so is it possible that this is not annexed? Is there any possibility at all, any scenario where this does not get annexed into the city?
It's not a done deal at this point, so it's always a possibility, but I know it's on the table for them.
That's the direction, that's the only direction the city can go.
I'm sorry?
That's the only direction the city can go. So eventually it will be annexed.
Theoretically.
I would say the
I don't see
likelihood
I don't
of
see
it
a time
not
when it's
being
not.
annexed
It's
is
not
pretty
realistic to
slim.
not have it, yeah. I have a question.
Especially where they have the annexation agreement signed and in place and they are agreeing to connect to the services, I think it would be pretty.
So they have the annexation agreement signed. What's the next step in the annexation process?
City of Pocatello, I believe, Commissioner, that planning and engineering from the City of Pocatello have already had their first meeting with the City Council, and the City Council has reviewed the annexation, and the City Council actually recommended a little bit larger area, and so now they're in the process of preparing and getting ready to send out notifications to most people that have signed the annexation agreements that annexation is coming, da-da-da-da-da, public hearing. They're in the process. I mean, it's not just a pie in the sky. They've already had conversations internally amongst the city government to do this.
And this is the area that we just had an agreement with the city of Pocatello on sidewalks.
That is correct.
Going out in that direction
That is
because
correct.
of the annexation.
What's the space between the neighbor and the access?
Yeah, this is, I know of 2 particular property owners that we were concerned about, telling the city, no, we don't want to be annexed.
The other one.
But in the conversations of those 2 property owners, it's been communicated to me is that they are of agreement and it's moving forward.
Stuart, to me, this is the type of project I was talking about that we need to look at and make room for those areas expand. This slides right in and it's nice, and to me, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And then well, you did show up.
The contract.
That's the developer, Nick Jensen. You probably know him. But we feel like this product fits that corridor
Yes.
really, really well.
Yes.
With the county currently has it zoned as mixed use. The city also in their comp plan shows it as mixed use. And so whichever direction it goes, it's a good use of that property and in that corridor.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think it fits perfect.
And for the record, representing the county, when they first proposed this to the planning council of the city of Pocatello, okay, planning and zoning. I went and testified that as a county, we agree and support the annexation for the simple fact that South Fifth behaves like the city. It doesn't behave like the county, and it doesn't, our ordinance doesn't all the time work to a developer's advantage. And once it goes to the city, it will behave accordingly, and it just makes more sense. We are proposing this for the simple fact, as I stated before, we're trying to help the property owner, developer, get a jump on the time frame for the simple fact that he would be a year and a half potentially out by the time he's then annexed by the city. He becomes formally part of the city. Then he starts the subdivision process with them, etc. So that's why we're before you. This was the methodology that allows us as a jurisdiction to move this forward.
And do you
As
feel
presented.
this process would make a comfortable handoff from us to Pocatello as they go through that development and the annexation?
Yes, this has had a preliminary review from the city of Pocatello.
City of Pocatello did provide comments when the applicant reached out to them as well, and most of their comments were based off of future use and meeting their zoning requirements for uses. They didn't have many comments regarding the actual plat.
Yeah.
Any concerns, Kyle?
No, I think they did it well. Even if they didn't take it over for the road side of things, we would be good with it. Does the city even have a temporary turnaround that they would require?
I think they do.
Do they?
Yeah.
Because it's got everything we need. The right-of-way is smaller, but a lot of that's not the road size, that's just the utilities. And with it being where it's at, most of the utilities are in the middle of the road, so it doesn't affect us.
So if this gets annexed by August, then you wouldn't have to worry about winter maintenance. That would be my only concern is winter maintenance.
I like the way you think.
You know, I'd like to pass that ball over to the city when it comes to winter maintenance as quick as possible. Board, any concerns?
I have questions, but it's mostly the city's judgment in regard to accesses, so I'm going to leave it go. If the city didn't say anything, there's no reason for me to say anything.
I don't think they mentioned anything on access.
Concerns?
No.
You
A
already know.
recommendation?
Can I borrow that for a second? There you go.
Unless you don't have.
Give Barb a second to absorb it.
Unless you don't have any comments or questions, we don't have any concerns. We've pretty well fleshed everything out. Elise Foster, subdivision planner, may have some comments that she could share with you. But beyond that, our recommendation is to accept the proposal as presented.
Commission? John?
I'm good with it.
It seems okay to me. I mean, the recommendation, everything, they've answered all my questions.
They answered mine. Do you have any addition?
I do have a couple comments based on ordinance does talk about on a planned unit development, you do have the ability to talk about architectural design and aesthetic values, so that's something you may want to review. Also during this process, reading the ordinance, there is the ability for a variance to be granted, a setback variance to be granted without them having to go through the variance process. It looks like Lot 1 and Lot 10 currently have structures in place. Do either of those structures need variances granted? Or are setbacks able to be met without concern?
I know the existing, not the newer building, but the older building
Lot 10?
meets all setbacks currently. I'd have to look at,
Lot 1 would require right-of-way setbacks of 10 feet for that structure.
which I think we show the edge of the building on the utility, on the 10-foot utility easement.
Okay.
So I think we're okay there.
And under building code, you're required to be 10 feet from property line, and you can be built right to the edge of the easement line.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which I think we meet that on all the other buildings.
okay.
Are Pocatello setbacks different than that?
Building code.
Okay, that's what, just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Do we need a motion on this, or are we
Yeah.
good with just a discussion?
That I'm not sure of.
Just go ahead and we'll make a motion, just so it's on the record. Then
Okay. Mr.
we-
Chair, I would move that we accept the PUD suggestion as presented by staff in regards to, what are we calling this? The Stan's, Stewart Ward? No.
Stan's Industrial Park.
Yeah, Stan's Industrial Park.
We have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. With that being said, thank you very much.
All right, Lee.
Oh, yeah. Ed, we appreciate you and the board and all that you do. That was our earlier discussion. Thank